Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Planetarium show. My name is Jessica. I am the director of the Planetarium, and it is just me here tonight. But that's okay. We have a fun show tonight talking about the astronomical events that are coming up this month. We've got some really good ones. Now, before I jump into our kind of what's coming up, as always, for any of our shows, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I will be keeping an eye on that. Now, since it is just me tonight, have a little bit of leniency. It might take me a second to see the questions when they come through, but I promise I will get to all of them. All right. So with that, let's get going. As I said, with our What's Up for May 2022. And also, as we often do with these shows, we are starting off with the moon. So we actually ended April with a new moon. So the first moon phase that we're going to see this month is the first quarter on May 8th. Then about a week later on the 15th, we will have a full moon. Now, May's full moon is sometimes referred to as the milk moon, or in several different indigenous tribes, they refer to it as some form of a planting moon, since this is the time of year that you start planting crops and things. And we also are going to have a super special event with this month's full moon, as it's going to be a total lunar eclipse. So I guess technically it'll be a blood milk moon, which definitely doesn't sound as nice. But I'll come back to the eclipse in a second. So after our full moon on the 15th, we will have the third quarter on the 22nd, and then at the end of the month on the 30th, we'll be back to the new moon. So you can see here all of the dates and times associated with the moon phases this month. All right, so let's get back to the 15th and that wonderful total lunar eclipse that's happening. So a lunar eclipse happens anytime the moon passes into the Earth's shadow. Because Earth has a shadow because there's light shining on it, just like anything else. And so when the moon passes into it, the Earth blocks the sunlight from reaching the moon and casts a shadow, and it darkens. And this is what we call a lunar eclipse. Now, depending on where the moon is in the Earth's shadow, we can have different stages to this eclipse. So you can see here that the Earth's shadow is in kind of two parts, the penumbra and the umbra. The penumbra is the area of partial shadow, meaning if you were standing on the moon, Earth would be blocking part of the sun, but not all of it. So you still do have some direct sunlight. Whereas the umbra is your total shadow. So if you were standing on the moon, the Earth would be completely blocking the sun and the sky. You would see no direct sunlight from it. So based off of this, we have kind of some main stages that a lunar eclipse goes through. Once the moon reaches the penumbra, that kind of partial shadow, it starts the penumbral eclipse phase. And during this phase, you actually won't see too much difference in the moon because you are still getting some direct sunlight, so it'll dim a little, but unless you're really looking for it, you may not even notice that something is going on. Then, once the moon reaches the umbra, we start the partial eclipse phase, and this is where you will really start to see the moon getting darker and darker and darker as more of it passes into the umbra. Once it is completely in the umbra, we are in the total eclipse phase. And then as it heads back out, we go back through. So it'll head, once it starts heading out of the umbra, we're back into the partial phase, and then we'll start seeing more and more. And then once it's fully out of the umbra and the penumbra, we'll be back in the penumbral phase until it's completely out of Earth's shadow and the eclipse has ended. Now, because Earth's shadow is very big, lunar eclipses take place over several hours. And the totality part, the total lunar eclipse portion, also takes place over about an hour. And this particular lunar eclipse is going to be a very long lunar eclipse, so there should be plenty of time for you to head out and take a look. Now, you may notice in these images that when the moon is in the umbra, it's not completely black. It doesn't completely disappear. It actually turns this coppery red color. And that happens because of Earth's atmosphere. You see, when sunlight passes through the Earth's atmosphere, it bounces or scatters off of the gases in our atmosphere. Colors like blues and greens, those get scattered very sharply, whereas the reds and oranges don't get scattered that much. And in fact, they actually get bent towards the moon. And so as the sunlight passes through the Earth's atmosphere, those reds actually get directed back towards the moon. And so while the moon is in the umbra, it's actually being hit by red light coming through Earth's atmosphere. And that's why it turns that brilliant kind of coppery red color. And that is why lunar eclipses are known as blood moons, because of that red color. So for this lunar eclipse, this is kind of who's going to be able to see it. So we, of course, have North and South America, Europe, or most of Africa is going to be able to see it. And depending on where exactly you are, so you can see kind of the legend here, where exactly you are, you may only see parts of the eclipse. So yeah, for us up here in Minnesota, we are going to be able to see the entire eclipse. So for those of you in Minnesota, this is kind of the timings for when the eclipse is going to happen. So that penumbral phase is going to begin at about 8:30. Then about an hour later at 9:27, the partial eclipse begins. Totality begins about an hour after that at 10:30. And then around midnight is when totality will end. So we get about a good hour and a half in totality. And then we have the rest of the ending of the eclipse, and it will fully end at about 1:50 a.m. on the morning of May 16th. Now, don't worry, if you are not in Minnesota or in this kind of region, I have a link in the video description to take you to timeanddate.com, where you can put in your location and it will give you exactly this information. It'll give you these timings for where you're located, so you can figure out when it will be visible and how much of the eclipse you will be able to see. Now, since we are getting a great view here in Duluth, we are going to have a viewing party for the lunar eclipse. So it'll take place that night, May 15th, and go from 9 p.m. until 11 or midnight. Kind of depends on how long people want to stay around and weather and how we're feeling and things like that. So we were going to have a couple of telescopes set up. We'll have one set up for people to be able to look through if you want to come to the planetarium, if you are in the Duluth area. But for anyone who can't make it but still wants to check it out, we will also have a second telescope that will be feeding a live stream here on Facebook Live of the eclipse. So you'll still be able to log on and check it out with us in Facebook land. So yes, very exciting. We're happy to be able to do this and to have such a fun event. And hopefully weather cooperates. Again, this is all weather permitting, but we'll see what happens that night. All right, moving right along, let's take a look at when and what planets are going to be visible this month. So we're going to start with our evening sky here. For the first half of the month, we can see little Mercury over in the western sky just after sunset. It is slowly making its way over towards the sun, so it's really only going to be easily visible for the first week and a half of the month before it gets too close to the sun. And in fact, it's going to pass the sun in the second half of the month on the 21st. Now, everything else this month is happening over in the morning sky. So right now in the morning, we have Venus, Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, and Saturn all visible just before sunrise. Now, Saturn and Mars are visible a few hours earlier. If you happen to be up, a couple hours after midnight, you can go ahead and start seeing them then. But then Jupiter and Venus are going to be coming up a little bit later, just before sunrise. Over the course of the month, we are going to see the planets kind of shuffle a little bit as they're all moving in their orbits. And in fact, on the 29th, Jupiter and Mars are going to be pretty close together. Going to make for a pretty fun viewing there. And then you can see here, just jumping from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, we can see that the planets have kind of moved around a little bit. Both Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn are heading out away from the sun, and Venus is slowly making its way back towards the sun. And at the end of the month, little Uranus is going to be visible just before sunrise. So at some point this month, we will be able to see all of the planets. Not all together all at once, but they will all be visible at some point this month. Now, if you're taking a look at this and you're noticing, hey, all of the planets kind of line up nice and neat, there's a reason for that. That's not just coincidence. So all of the planets orbit the sun in roughly the same plane. So our solar system is like a flat disk. And so because of that, all of the planets lie along the same line, which represents kind of the plane of our solar system, which we call the ecliptic. And so that will always be the case. The planets will always fall along that ecliptic, nice and neat. And so we'll be able to see them all lined up like this. Okay. We do have a meteor shower coming up this month, actually tomorrow night. We have the Eta Aquarids meteor shower. This has been running from about April 19th and will run until about May 28th. So if you've noticed any particularly bright meteors in the past few days, it's probably the Eta Aquarids. These are debris left behind by Comet Halley in particular. That's the cause of this meteor shower. So the peak of the shower is going to be the night of May 5th into the early morning of May 6th, so tomorrow night. You can be able to start seeing meteors after it gets dark, although before midnight, you are going to have the moon in the sky, which is going to kind of drown some of the dimmer meteors out, make them a little bit harder to see. But then after midnight, the moon is going to set, and you'll have much better viewing conditions. And the kind of radiant or the location that the meteors appear to come from isn't going to rise until about 3:30 local time. So really, after midnight is going to be your best time to go and search, and you're going to want to look kind of more to either the southeast or the northeast to see these streaming by. All right, last up, let's take a look at what the International Space Station is doing this month. And for those of us here in Duluth, we've actually got a month filled with ISS passovers. I just grabbed some of them from the end of the month. But if you head to the link that's down there, heavensabove.com, it's also linked in the video description, you'll be able to see all of the options for us here in May. And of course, if you're somewhere other than Duluth, you can head to that site and put in your location and see what it's visible for you. Now, when you get this information, it's basically going to display it based off of the day and the time that the Passover is going to happen. So if you want to look for, a good one to possibly try and catch, obviously you want to look for a time that you are going to be up. You also want to pay attention to the second column, this brightness, because that's going to, of course, tell you how bright the space station is going to be. And this brightness is given in what we call magnitudes, which is kind of a backward scale, in that the smaller the number, the brighter it is. So to see the best views, the brightest space station pass over, which would give you the best chance of being able to see it and recognize it, you want to look for the smallest magnitude possible. Once you have the Passover that you want to take a look at, all you need to do is click on that date, and it will pull up a star map which shows kind of where the ISS is going to pass by in your sky. So it'll show you the path it takes. And then it will also give you kind of the timings here on when that's going to happen. So you can know exactly when and where to take a look. And it'll show that on the map as well. And again, that just happens from clicking on whatever date you want. So this one was specifically for that May 28th flyover. And that is our astronomical events for May. For anyone who's going to be in Duluth and interested, here is our upcoming show schedule. So Friday's in-person show will be Journey Through the Solar System. And then Saturday, we are still running Earth, Moon, and Sun at 2 p.m. for our children's show, and Mars 1001 at 7 p.m. for our general public show. And you can find a link in the video description for tickets. Although I just tried to check it earlier, and it looked like the link was temporarily not working. So I'm gonna figure out what's going on there. It might just be temporarily down. We'll see what's going on there. But that is our astronomical events for May. So let me take a look. Oh, yes, thank you for pointing that out. For that magnitude scale that we were talking about, Venus at its brightest is a magnitude of -4. So just to kind of give you a reference there of what these numbers mean. And really, any of them you can see, it's just the brightest ones are going to be the most obvious. And so they're kind of the best ones to pick, especially if you're in an area that has a little bit of like light pollution or anything. You definitely want to try and pick the brightest pass. Okay. Well, I will leave it open for a minute to see if there are any questions, either about any of these upcoming events or anything else. I did not quite have time to prepare my usual James Webb update. It has been a very busy week. It is finals week here at UMD, so we are very, very busy. I know that it has finished the mirror alignment, which is very exciting. And the last stage is instrument alignment. So just making sure that all of the different instruments in the telescope are able to talk to each other. And they said that testing should happen over about a month to 2 months. So we're looking at probably July when we're going to get the first real science out of James Webb, which is super exciting. I cannot wait. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so I think we will wrap it up there. Remember, meteor shower tomorrow night and total lunar eclipse the night of May 15th. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We hope that you had a fun show, and we hope to see you again next time. So, bye everyone.